Hello and welcome to Skyline, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dhruti Yatri. Tonight we have 14 stories. And you know what? They may look completely different from one another. 14 stories, one bigger picture. The world is changing, and for Indians living, working, studying, or building businesses abroad, these changes, well, they can be deeply personal. So tonight we are not just going to tell you what happened. We are going to ask the bigger questions. What does it mean? Who is affected? And what happens next? This is Skyline, and let's start with it. First of all, what happens when your US visa interview? It is suddenly postponed, and you have no idea when it will happen again. Well, for thousands of people waiting to travel to America, that uncertainty, it has now become real. The Trump administration has paused or rescheduled visa interviews at the US embassies and consulate, and that too around the world. The US State Department says that the changes are connected to global training initiative for consular officers. You know what? Here the department also says that visa appointments are being adjusted so that officers can undergo training designed to improve screening and ensure applicants are evaluated comprehensively and consistently. Now, on paper, this may look like an administrative exercise, a training program, a scheduling issue, basically a temporary disruption. But for somebody who's waiting for months for a visa, one postponed appointment that can mean so much more than a date on a calendar. It can mean a delayed university admission, a postponed job, a cancelled travel plan, a family separated for longer. Well, here reports said that some immigrant visa applicants who already had interviews scheduled received emails informing them that their appointment, they were being rescheduled and that they would be given a new date later on. The State Department has not given a very precise timeline for how long these changes will actually last. And there's another reason why this story is attracting so much attention. This is happening while the Trump administration is already pursuing a much broader immigration crackdown. The administration has revoked visas and green cards in some cases, rejected applications for various reasons here, and is pushing new restriction on immigration. According to the reports provided to TimesXP, the administration is reviewing a proposal to overhaul the H-1B program and plans to revoke visas of about 200,000 people who entered the country for tourism or businesses and later they sought the asylum. So, when you put all of these developments together, the bigger picture absolutely clear. The American immigration system is becoming more restrictive now and more closely scrutinized. And Indians are watching this particularly closely because Indian professionals make up a major share of employment-based immigration to the United States. Well, the key point tonight, very simple. A visa appointment being postponed, it does not automatically mean your visa has been rejected. It means the process has been disrupted. But when immigration policy is changing at the same time, every single delay, that creates more anxiety. And yes, that brings us to our next story tonight, because even if you eventually get your visa, what happens if the government changes the rule that is governing the job that brought you to America in the first place? For years, the H-1B system became one of the main bridges connecting Indian technology talent with American companies. Now that bridge is facing new scrutiny. The Department of Homeland Security has submitted a proposed rule targeting several areas of H-1B program. Among them are tighter restrictions involving CAP-exempt employer, greater scrutiny of companies with previous H-1B compliance violation, and increased oversight of foreign workers employed at the third-party work sites here. And that third-party issue, it is particularly important for the Indian IT industry. For years, staffing companies and consulting firms have placed foreign professionals at the premises of American clients. Well, that model became a major part of the technology ecosystem. An Indian engineer, it could technically be employed by one company but spend their working day at another company's office. And now, according to the report, DHS wants much stronger verification of those arrangements. Who is actually supervising the worker? Where does the worker physically work? What exactly are they doing? And can the employer prove that the job being performed matches what was stated in the H-1B petition? Well, those questions could become much more important. Here the proposed changes also target what are known as cap-exempt employers, including certain university-affiliated organizations. Ladies and gentlemen, at the same time, the report also points to a proposed supplemental fee of more than $103,000 for certain cap-subject petition, certainly under review. Now, think about what this really means from the employer's perspective. If hiring a foreign professional, that becomes more expensive, more complicated, more heavily audited, companies may start asking a very simple question. Is this hire worth the additional cost and compliance burden? And you know what? That is where immigration policy that meets the labor market here. Because an H-1B is not simply a document. It is tied to a job, an employer, and a specific set of responsibilities. In the meantime, for Indian tech professionals, the biggest message is that third-party placement arrangements, well, they may face much greater scrutiny if these proposals become final. But there is another immigration story here that could be even more important for people who are already inside America. Because getting into the United States, it is one challenge, but getting a green card, that's the bigger challenge. Well, for Indian professionals who have spent years waiting for a US green card, the latest visa bulletin, it brings a painful message. Patience is still required. That's right, September 2026 visa bulletin shows serious pressure in several employment-based categories for Indian applicants. According to the reports, EB2 India is listed as unavailable, while EB5 unreserved for India is also unavailable for final action. EB1 India remains at October 15, 2022, while EB3 India remains at January 1st, 2014. Now, the word unavailable, that can sound confusing. It does not necessarily mean that your entire green card application has been rejected. No. It means that the government has exhausted the available visa numbers for that particular category for the remainder of the fiscal year. And that is why September becomes such an important month. The US government operates on a fiscal year that ends on September 30. Then, on October 1st, a new fiscal year begins and new visa allocation that becomes available. So for many applicants, there is a strange combination of bad news and cautious hope. The bad news, visa number has exhausted, and the possible relief, well, a new fiscal year is around the corner. But yes, even that does not magically erase the backlog. Well, the report also warns of potential pressure on EB1 India, worldwide EB2 and EB5 categories because of high demand. And this is where immigration paperwork that becomes a race against time. There are two different charts applicants need to understand here. Dates for filing and final action dates. One determines whether certain paperwork can be submitted. The other one determines when a green card can actually be approved. Well, that distinction can be critical. For Indian applicants, specifically those who have spent years building their career in the United States, the green card, it's not just an immigration document. It can determine whether they can stay permanently, whether their children can grow up without immigration uncertainty, and most importantly, whether they can plan their careers and lives without constantly checking the next visa bulletin. And yes, now from the green card queue, we move to an even more immediate question tonight. Well, the question is, what happens to an H-1B worker the day their job disappears? You lose your job today, your office badge, it stops working. Your salary stops, but your immigration clock, well, that might not stop. Under the current rule described in the reports, eligible H-1B, L1, O1 and TN workers who lose employment can receive a discretionary grace period of up to 60 days or until their authorized stay it expires, whichever comes first. But now that 60-day period, it is extremely important. It gives a worker some time to find another employer, transfer their status, or make another lawful immigration arrangement. But here DHS has proposed something that could fundamentally change that safety net. The proposal, currently under internal review, seeks to eliminate the discretionary 60-day grace period altogether. And let us be very, very clear here. This is a proposal. It is not a current law. Well, according to the report, the rule has not yet been published for public comment, finalized, or implemented. So yes, the workers currently protected by the existing 60-day rule, they should not assume that the protection it has already disappeared. But the question is, why does the proposal actually matter? It does. You know why? Because if that window disappears, the timing of the job loss that becomes much more serious. Today, a worker who is laid off may have time to find a new sponsor. Without that buffer, an employer may need to move much faster with a new H-1B filing. And yes, for somebody working in technology, where layoffs can happen suddenly, that could create a lot of pressure on them. Think about the reality here. You lose your job. You have a mortgage, your children are in school, your spouse has a job. You have spent years building a life in America, and suddenly the question becomes, how quickly can you find another employer willing to sponsor you? That is why this proposal is being watched so closely by Indian professionals. In fact, the report also discusses possible immigration pathways such as changes of status or dependent status. But yes, these are highly fact-specific legal matter, and it should not be treated as automatic solution. The bigger point, much simpler. For an H-1B worker, time is not just money. Time can be immigration status. And now, imagine facing that same uncertainty when you are not merely an employee, but the founder of the company itself. Silicon Valley likes to celebrate the immigrant entrepreneurs. But what happens when that entrepreneur's company suddenly runs out of money, reconstructs, or removes the founder from the job? That is the concern behind another proposed DHS change. Immigrant founders have historically had to navigate very complicated rules around H-1B status, company ownership, and the employer-employee relationship. And now, according to TimesXP's report, recent USCIS modernization effort, it has created clearer pathway for some foreign entrepreneurs to build companies while maintaining status. But you know what? The proposed elimination of 60-day grace period, it could create a particularly difficult situation for all the founders because startups are unpredictable. A large corporation may have years of financial reserves. A startup may have just 3 months. One funding round can decide whether the company survives or not. One board meeting can change the CEO. One investor can walk away. And if the founder's immigration status it is tied to that company, a business crisis can quickly become an immigration crisis. In fact, the report also highlights several potential vulnerabilities, including venture capital reconstructing, funding delays, and questions around the employer-employee relationship required for certain H-1B arrangements. Well, that creates a very strange contradiction if you see. America wants entrepreneurs to build companies. It wants innovation, it wants investment, it wants startup creating jobs. But the immigration system also imposes strict conditions on how foreign founders can structure those businesses further. And you know what? That is why this particular debate, it is bigger than just one visa category. It is about whether immigration policy encourages immigrants' entrepreneurship as well, or makes the risk of entrepreneurship even higher for people who are already navigating a very complicated legal system. And yes, when policies are uncertain, entrepreneurs, they do not sit and wait. They organize, they speak out, they lobby, they prepare legal challenges, and that takes us to our next story. When policy is being written in Washington, the people affected by that policy are not necessarily staying silent. According to the reports acquired by TimesXP, a growing mobilization among South Asian community leaders, immigration advocates, lawyers, and technology workers around the proposed elimination of H-1B 60-day grace period. And the biggest weapon they are preparing to use is something very, very American: public comment. Ladies and gentlemen, when a general agency proposes a major regulation, there is generally a formal process through which members of the public, members of the companies and organization, they can submit their views. And those comments, they can really matters. Advocates are preparing argument around the practical reality of hiring. A technology company may need weeks to interview somebody. Then there are background checks, internal approvals, salary negotiation, immigration paperwork, and potentially additional processing time too. So, advocates argue that removing a transition period, it could make it extremely difficult for employers and workers to complete the process legally. In fact, they're also pushing an alternative idea here. Let me share it with you. Instead of eliminating the grace period, expand it from 60 days to 180 days. But yes, there is something very important to remember here. The proposal is not yet the final rule. Report says it remains an early review, and that existing 60-day protection, that remains operational. So this is a story about a potential future change and about people trying to influence that future before it becomes a law. And yes, that brings us to something fascinating. The same technology industry that is fighting to protect the immigrant pathways, it is also undergoing a massive transformation because of artificial intelligence. Well, our next story is about what happens when the machines themselves, they start changing the economics of the entire Silicon Valley. For years, the AI boom had one obvious symbol: the GPU. Powerful processors, giant data centers, massive computing cost. But now the biggest AI companies increasingly want something different here. They want to design the hardware themselves. According to the report, OpenAI has unveiled Jalapeno, a custom inference, the chip developed by the Boat Corp. The chip is designed specifically for running AI models rather than trying to do everything that a general purpose processor can do. Now, in layman's language, what does that mean? Because running an AI at autonomous scale, it is expensive. Every time you ask an AI model a question, computers somewhere, they have to process that request. Millions of users, billions of requests, massive electricity consumption, huge data centers. So companies are looking for ways to squeeze more performance out of every single unit of energy and every dollar spent. According to TimesXP's report, ladies and gentlemen, early testing indicates the custom chip, it could significantly reduce the cost per token as compared with conventional GPU clusters here. But the biggest story is not just OpenAI. Google has its TPUs, Amazon has Infinitia, Meta has its own AI escalators. The technology giants are increasingly building specialized hardware for themselves. Why? Because owning more of hardware stack, it can mean greater control over cost, over supply, over performance. And this could have consequences for Indian engineers too. The skills company want may gradually change. Instead of only asking whether you know software development, companies may increasingly want people who do understand hardware software code design, who do understand system engineering, who do understand AI infrastructure. And that is a major shift. Because the AI revolution, it is not happening only inside software. It is moving all the way down to the Silicon Valley. And if hardware becomes more specialized here, well, the jobs around it will become more specialized too. Which, by the way, brings us to California. Because while Silicon Valley is building the next generation of AI hardware, California is also trying to measure who is losing jobs because of AI transformation. What do you do when AI is actually replacing jobs? Not from a CEO speech, not from a viral LinkedIn post, not from a headline saying AI will take your job. You look at the data, and California has launched a new tool designed to do exactly that. According to a report received by TimesXP, Governor Mr. Gavin Newsom's administration has deployed a California AI unemployment tracker developed by state's Employment Development Department alongside researchers at UC Berkeley and UCLA. The tool uses unemployment insurance claim and AI exposure data to identify where job losses may be emerging. And the data that is specifically interesting, and that too around highly educated technology workers. According to the report, unemployment claims among workers with advanced degrees and highly AI exposed professions, well, it has increased, with San Francisco Bay Area showing particular pressure here. Now, there is an important distinction. A technology worker being laid off does not automatically mean AI directly replaces that individual. Companies restructure for many reasons here. They reduce the cost, they flatten management, they move money into new division, they change the strategy, and sometimes they use AI as part of that transformation. But for the workers, the result can look remarkably similar. The team gets smaller, the workload gets bigger, the hiring bar that gets higher. And if you are an H-1B worker, there is an additional layer here. Well, you may not have the luxury of spending 6 months looking for your next opportunity. The report highlights the pressure that is being created by existing immigration timeline and recommends that workers keep track of labor market changes and maintain appropriate immigration planning. So AI is changing not only what people do, it is changing how secure their job feels. But sometimes the controversy is not about losing your job. Sometimes it is about something much more ordinary here: getting through an airport. A video from an American airport has triggered a much bigger debate among the Indian diaspora. Where does genuine assistance end, the misuse begin? Ladies and gentlemen, according to reports, a viral video from Dallas Fort Worth International Airport involves an Indian family welcoming the parents. Well, the video showed an elderly woman being taken through the airport in a wheelchair and later walking away without the assistance here. The video sparked criticism online, with some people accusing travelers of misusing accessibility services. But here's where we need to slow down. Not every person who can walk needs no wheelchair assistance. Some disabilities are not immediately visible. Some people can walk short distances, but they cannot manage the long distances inside the airport. Some elderly travelers, they may struggle with fatigue. Some passengers may need assistance because they are unfamiliar with the airport. They do not speak English comfortably, or they have difficulty navigating the connections. So a video lasting a few seconds, it cannot tell us somebody's entire medical situation. And at the very same time, the controversy raises a legitimate question about the integrity of accessibility services. If somebody who do not genuinely needs mobility assistance use the system simply as a shortcut, well, that can create problems for passengers who actually depend on it. And that is why this particular debate that becomes so emotional within Indian American community, because whatever Indians do in US, they are being judged. Use a wheelchair, you are being judged. Because there is another layer here: diaspora image. Well, when one person posts a life hack online, millions of people can see it. And suddenly an individual decision can become a stereotype about an entire community. The larger lesson is simple: accessibility services exist for accessibility needs. If the actual problem is language, navigation, or simply needing somebody to guide an elderly parent through a huge airport, well, there may be other legitimate assistance options. And yes, now we move from the airport rules to something much more serious. Because for undocumented immigrants in America today, the concern is not about assistance. It is about arrest. The Trump administration promised a massive immigration crackdown, and now communities across America are seeing what that promise looks like on the ground. According to the reports, ICE agents arrested 103,028 undocumented immigrants in Maryland and Virginia between August 1st and August 15th as part of the Operation Safe County, Washington, D.C. That means more than 400 of those arrests, they were described as having committed crimes or having criminal convictions here. But the operation has also raised concern because immigration enforcement, it can affect people who do not have criminal convictions here. Maryland and Virginia include counties with sanctuary policies, where local authorities may limit cooperation with federal immigration enforcement. But sanctuary policies do not prevent federal immigration authorities from carrying out federal enforcement. And that is exactly what this operation demonstrates. Immigration enforcement is now reaching communities that previously felt somewhat insulated from federal raids. The report also describes arrest of Gujarati immigrants in other parts of the country and says that immigration lawyers are questioning some enforcement practices too. Well, the Trump administration has reportedly set an ambitious target of 2,000 immigration arrests per day. Yes, per day. While the report says that the ICE has been averaging around 1,400 to 1,500 arrests daily. For Indians, Gujaratis, Punjabis, this creates a very real sense of uncertainty. Who is being targeted? What happens if somebody has a pending asylum case? What happens during a traffic spot? What happens if a person has lived in America for years but does not have a permanent status? These are not abstract questions anymore. They affect the families, they affect workplaces, they affect communities. And sometimes, well, the consequences, they can be devastating. You know why? Because our next story, it is about a Gujarati business owner whose life, it ended in a violent attack inside the store that he had only recently taken over. A new business, a new beginning, a family standing nearby, and then suddenly a violent crime. According to an I Am Gujarat report, Suresh Patel, a Gujarati man who operated a liquor store in Tennessee, he was shot and he passed away on August 20. The suspect, identified as Corey Hogg, he was later arrested after a high-speed chase. According to their report, the suspect entered Ridgecrest Cellars and demanded money while Mr. Patel, he was working at the cash register. Patel handed over the money, but the whole situation, it still turned deadly. What makes the story even more heartbreaking is that Mr. Patel had taken over the store only 4 days earlier. His 19-year-old daughter was reportedly there when the whole incident happened. The suspect also allegedly connected to another similar incident at a convenience store, where the employee, he also passed away because of that particular incident. The whole investigation, it is in full extent of suspects' alleged crime activity that is continuing. But beyond the investigations and the arrest, there's a human side. A family that has just started a business. A father was working, a daughter was nearby, and a routine evening that became a tragedy. For immigrant families, small businesses often represents much more than income here. Well, they represent independence, years of saving, a new chapter, a dream built one day at a time. And when violence that destroys that dream, the impact does not end at the crime scene. It stays with the family, it stays with the community, and it stays with the people who knew the victim. But yes, our next story takes us from one immigrant family facing tragedy to another family facing a completely different kind of separation. And this time the father is in immigration custody and the son is thousands of kilometers away, serving in the US Navy. That's right, a US Navy sailor is deployed overseas. His father is at home in America. Then one phone call, it changes everything. According to reports acquired by TimesXP, Louis Evans, a 48-year-old man from Nicaragua who had lived in the United States for 19 years. 19. He was arrested by immigration authorities in Key West, Florida. In the meantime, his son, Joshua, he was serving aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln. See the emotional contradiction here. A son is serving the United States. His father is being held by US immigration authorities. The Department of Homeland Security, they say that the father, he would remain in ICE custody while the government pursued deportation proceeding and argued that having a family member in military, that does not exempt somebody from immigration law. But for the family, the issue that is deeply personal. Joshua reportedly said that he had been working maybe 12 hours shift for more than 250 days aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln that is deployed in West Asia. And then, while serving aboard, he received the news that his father has been detained. His sister described the family separation as devastating. She said Joshua had joined the military partly because he believed that it could improve his father's chances of obtaining citizenship. Think about that. A young man joins the military believing that his service could help secure his family's future. And then, while he is serving overseas, his father is detained. Well, the report also says at least several family members of active duty US service members have faced deportation proceeding under the Trump administration's immigration crackdown. There are legal protections that are available to some military families, but they have eligibility requirements and they do not apply automatically to everyone in the military. Well, that's why the story is so complicated. It sits at the intersection of military service, immigration law, and family separation. The son is serving the country, the father is fighting to remain in the country. And yes, here the government is saying that immigration law, it must still be enforced here. Ladies and gentlemen, we have three realities, one family, and after all these stories about America, immigration and uncertainty. Let us move to a country that is taking a very different approach to the Indian talent. France. Because while America is fighting several immigration pathways, France is actively trying to attract more and more Indians. One country is making immigration harder. Another is saying, come, study here. That's right. France is stepping up its effort to attract Indian students and has set a target of 30,000 Indian students by 2030. More than 50 French higher education institutions are expected to participate in a 4-city Choose France tour in October. The tour will travel to Mumbai, Pune, New Delhi and Bengaluru, giving students and parents an opportunity to meet French universities and learn about courses, scholarships, visas and career opportunities. And the number that shows why France is interested. Indian enrollment in French higher education reaches around 9,100 students in 2024-25 academic year, and this is according to the report. That made India France's 11th largest source of international students, up from 13 previously. And when short-term students and other categories are included, the number of Indians in France, that would be around 12,000 in 2025. But France is not simply looking for students here. It is looking for future talent. It is looking for AI, aerospace, management, research, engineering, innovation. During Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to France in June, the two nations signed 19 agreements linked to innovation and adopted an India-France Innovation Roadmap 2030. They also established a joint working group on artificial intelligence, while PM Modi invited French universities to establish campuses in India. This is where the story becomes strategic. Countries are competing for talent, not just tourists, not just for students, for engineers, for researchers, entrepreneurs, scientists, AI specialists. The global talent race, it is becoming a geopolitical race now. If one country closes a door, another country can open it wide. And for Indian students, that means the global education map, it is definitely changing. Well, America remains hugely important here, but France is saying, we want you too. And now, ladies and gentlemen, our final story takes us from the global race for human talent to the race for military technology, because the United States has just unveiled a weapon designed to give its fighter jets something that they desperately want in future wars: more distance. Can you imagine a fighter jet that does not need to get close to its enemy to strike? That is the basic idea behind America's newly unveiled AIM-424 long-range air-to-air missile. Nickname? Malice. Well, the US Navy publicly unveiled the weapon at the 2026 Tailhawk Symposium in Reno, Nevada. The missile is designed to have an operational range exceeding 250 nautical miles, roughly about 463 kilometers. That's a lot. And the real innovation is not simply the range here. It is the fact that the missile is being designed to fit inside the internal weapons base of stealth aircraft. Think about why this matters. A stealth fighter is valuable because it is difficult for enemy radar to detect. But if you hung a huge missile and weapon underneath that particular aircraft, you can compromise some of that stealth advantage. The malice is designed to avoid that particular problem. It is extended for aircraft including the F-35C, with the supplied material also discussing compatibility with the F-22 and future 6th generation platform. And the question is, why does America need such a long-range weapon? Because its competitors have developed increasingly powerful long-range air-to-air missile. According to reports, China's PL-15 and PL-17 and Russia's R-37M, they are the examples here. And that changes the whole battlefield. If an enemy can shoot from hundreds of kilometers away, American support aircraft such as the airborne early warning aircraft and tankers, they may have to operate farther from the fight. And that affects the entire air campaign. So the US response, it is not simply build a bigger missile. It is build a missile that can travel farther, remain compatible with the stealth aircraft and operate as a part of a network of sensors and weapons. The report describes a two-stage propulsion architecture and a network guidance system that can receive information from the aircraft, ship, drone or other sensors here. And this points towards something much bigger here. The future battlefield will not be one aircraft against another aircraft. It will be networks against networks. It will be sensors against the sensors, satellites, drones, stealth fighters, warship, artificial intelligence, data link, and missiles capable of striking targets thousands of kilometers away. Now, coming back to AIM-424, it is therefore not just another missile. It represents the larger race for first detection, first targeting, and first strike. And yes, that brings us to the end of our 14 stories tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight we started with a visa appointment and we ended with a missile that can potentially travel 463 kilometers. And that is why here on Skyline we look far beyond the headlines, because the headline tells us what happened. But the real question is, why did it happen? Who benefits? Who pays the price? And what happens next? I'm Dhruti Atri. This was Skyline. Stay informed, stay cautious, and most importantly, look beyond the headlines.